This is Will Travers, who is the president of the Born Free Foundation, Born Free USA, and the Species Survival Network. He has dedicated his life to wildlife issues since living in Kenya. In 1984, he co-founded the Born Free Foundation, which works to stop individual wild animal suffering, protect threatened species, and promote compassionate conservation worldwide. The film Born Free was made by his parents, Virginia McKenna and Bill Travers. Welcome, Will. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. Right, now, unlike David, who's brilliant with no prompts or script, and Geordie, who's got a PowerPoint, you've just got that slide and me talking very quickly, because I've got a huge speech. It was meant to be 1,500 words, it's 4,100 words. Okay, so I'll just talk very to the point, and hopefully there'll be time for questions, but I'm not going to waste any more time. So I'm delighted to be asked to contribute to this important discussion about hunting, set as it is against the backdrop of widespread and growing public concern about a practice which seems out of step with public attitudes in many parts of the world and the mood of civil society. And I'd like to thank University of Winchester, and in particular Professor Andrew Knight, Centre for Animal Welfare and the Institute of Value Studies for inviting me. There are others who are far better qualified to talk about hunting in a more general sense, so hunting for food or subsistence hunting, humane killing of animals, UK legislation, etc. So I'm going to focus on trophy hunting, and that's the intentional killing of wild animals for fun. It's a hot issue. A few days ago, the French Environment Minister Ségolène Royal announced a ban on the import of lion trophies into France in response to information provided by my good friends at the Brigitte Bardot Foundation. On Tuesday, I attended an adjournment debate in the House of Commons about lion trophy hunting, thanks to David Jones MP, where the Minister, in response, said that if countries with lion trophy hunting did not get their act together within, say, 2 years, then the UK would follow France's lead. That evening, I was privileged enough to be invited to a screening of Racing Extinction in London, a new film made by the amazing Louis Bissoyas, and last night 600 of us gathered at the Royal Geographical Society to witness blood lions bred for the bullet. That's why it's so regrettable, in my view, that those who might wish to argue in favour of hunting have chosen to withdraw from this event. But as Churchill said, better to jaw than war. Only through informed discussion can we make progress and change entrenched attitudes that may have prevailed for centuries. So I want to set my brief remarks, not that brief, into a couple of important contexts: the international legal framework which regulates the trade in trophies and the growing human impact on the natural world. So let me start with the Convention on the International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, or CITES. It's worth recalling that the word endangered, as far as CITES goes, is used very loosely to mean species that are or may be negatively affected by international trade. In fact, as my good friend Dr. Ron Orenstein is fond of remarking, the only place the word endangered appears in the Convention is in the title. The CITES Convention was signed in Washington, D.C. in 1973. It entered into force in 1975. There are now 181 contracting parties, so countries, or including the EU, so multilaterals, with the latest party being the EU, although the 28 member states of the EU have been parties to CITES for some time, and they vote as a bloc. CITES relies on trade measures, trade control, to achieve its objectives, and trade measures can be found throughout the convention text as well as the resolutions and decisions adopted by the parties. CITES is science-based, largely. It has a robust compliance mechanism, largely, and it is also used to help resolve disputes between parties. Now, those last kind of 3 paragraphs aren't my words. They belong to the Secretary-General of CITES, and of course he wants to make a glowing report for the convention that he's responsible for, and in some respects he's right. They do correctly establish the principles on which CITES is founded. There are often great expectations about CITES, and we'll come to trophy hunting in a moment. CITES, people think that CITES can just simply ban trade. that it is a global wildlife police force, that it can intervene in internal wildlife matters, for example, stop baby elephants being ripped from their mothers and shipped to zoos, as apparently is going to be the case fairly soon, to zoos in America, with elephants caught in Swaziland, however reprehensible that may be to people, and include myself in that. That it is a conservation charter. It is none of the above. Those expectations are built on a misunderstanding of the treaty and how it functions, how species are added to, move between, or removed from the appendices, Appendix 2 permitting commercial international trade subject to monitoring, and Appendix 1 banning any international trade that is primarily commercial in nature, and the primary role of governments, national governments, in ensuring the survival of species that are or may be threatened by international trade. People often say to me that we should get rid of CITES, that it's failed. For sure, CITES can be improved, but, and here's the thing we can play, imagine for a moment that it didn't exist. Then we all sat in this room and said, you know what, all these species in trade, they need some sort of protection. We need an international treaty that's aimed at controlling and, where necessary, preventing trade in species whose future could be in jeopardy because of that trade. We'll need a secretariat to make sure countries stick to the rules, and so that, in principle, everyone plays by those rules. The secretariat needs to be able to suspend trade in species of wild fauna and flora from any country that goes too far. We'll need a scientific authority in each country to assess the viability of any trade in live animals and plants or specimens. We'll need a management authority in each country to ensure compliance with national laws that reflect the terms of the treaty, and to manage trade at a national level. And I guess what we'll need is a meeting of all the parties, everyone who agrees with this, let's say every 2 or 3 years, where proposals relating to trade will be discussed, and a vote of 2/3 or more in favour of the motion will be internationally binding. Sounds like a pretty good idea to me. But remember, in my fantasy, this doesn't exist. It's an idea that we've all just dreamed up. Now ask yourselves, would we today ever be able to turn that idea from dream to reality? And I suspect the answer would be a solid no. You look at the other multilateral environmental agreements that have come along since CITES, so CBD, CMS, and more, important in their own right, but do they have the potential to take the kind of measures that CITES has, to hold countries to account, to introduce trade sanctions at a global level? Sadly not. We have CITES, and we must be thankful for that, and we must make the most of it, make it work much harder, to its full potential. And in my view, we must ensure it delivers a precautionary agenda so that we don't speculate on our wildlife heritage, but we conserve and protect and nurture it. So, to my second context, growing human impact on the natural world, and I will come to trophy hunting. How will those areas with wildlife be affected by the predicted growth in the human population? I've taken Africa as an example. According to a new EU report, which draws on UN data, it's now possible to predict with 80% accuracy, which is fairly good, the human population in each African country in 2100, so in about 84 years' time. Basically, a single average Western human lifetime away, compared to today. Well, according to that data, there are likely to be only 2 countries in Africa where the human population will go up by less than 50%, and they are South Africa and Djibouti. There are 3 countries where the human population will only go up between 50 and 100%, and they are Lesotho, Botswana, and Namibia. Elsewhere, and I'm going to give you some representative samples, the statistics are very different. Angola, 500%. Malawi, 500%. Mozambique, more than 400%. Zambia, 800%. Kenya, 400%. Burundi, 550%. Tanzania, 550%. Uganda, 550%. In Nigeria, where 28% of girls don't complete primary education, the population is predicted to rise from 174 million in 2013 to 913 million by 2100. Overall, the human population of Africa will increase from about 1 billion today to 4 billion in 2100. So the question is not so much can we save the elephant or the lion or the rhino, but can we save anything? Of course, those raw numbers don't reflect the global pressure on natural resources, which is an additional component. Remember, the average US citizen will use 10 times the resources of the average Indian citizen, and a UK citizen will use 8 times those resources during their lifetime. So it's not just about raw number of people, but our insatiable appetite for resources. Here's my bit of polemic. Will we, to our shame, be left with living museums, zoos, a subject that may be coming up here at the university in the near future, populated by a tiny number of the more charismatic species, a constant reminder of how we destroyed the rest of life on Earth? Are we the anthropoid equivalent of a swarm of locusts? We think we're smart, but maybe we're just the stupid cause of the 6th great extinction. So this growth rate and impact on resources may not be replicated in quite the same way across the world as a whole, but you get my point. Inevitably, with about 11 billion people on this tiny planet, the interface between human beings and wildlife and what remains of wild places will dramatically intensify. It seems to me that in managing that interface we have 4 options, and I will come to trophy hunting. The first is to simply eliminate the interface. When wildlife and their habitats and the natural resources they lock up get in the way of human progress, take them out. Well, it's an option. The question is, how can we prevent it from becoming an inevitability? Secondly, we could manage that interface through a sort of simple utilitarian control mechanism. In other words, when there is conflict, competition with livestock or habitat or disease or whatever, we just remove the species in question. We trap it, we poison, we shoot, we gas. And the outcome at an individual level is certain: elimination. And the long-term sustainability of such an approach is very doubtful. Thirdly, we park our moral compass and we dress up lethal utilization as an acceptable form of management, claiming that it contributes to conservation and benefits disadvantaged communities. Trophy hunting. And fourthly, we try to create an environment of coexistence that seeks to balance the needs of people, that respects the requirements of non-human species, considers that those species are made up of individuals whose individual needs and well-being should be taken fully into consideration, and conserves and protects the natural environment on which they, and without doubt, hundreds of millions, if not billions of humans also rely. So I'm going to focus now on that third option, trophy hunting. Does it benefit in any significant and irreplaceable way, importantly, the conservation of species and the empowerment, development and opportunities for local communities? So I've got some numbers for you. And they mainly relate, but not exclusively, to lions, which is the species of the moment. The number of African lion trophies imported into the US in 2013 and 14, according to the US Fish and Wildlife Service, was 1,374. The number of African lion trophies imported into the US in 2015 so far, according to NBC, an investigative unit, is 415. The number of African lion trophies imported into the US in the last 15 years is 7,297. In the same month that Cecil the lion was shot by a US hunter, that dentist, other US hunters legally shot 69 African lions and brought the trophies back home. Americans hunting abroad kill 650 different species for sport. 1.2 million sport trophies have been imported into the USA in the last 15 years, Fish and Wildlife Service. Approximate number of lions in South Africa is 9,100. However, of that, just 2,700 are wild. The rest are in captive breeding facilities, bred for the bullet. Since 2010, the federal government in the USA has documented 2,963 violations in relation to sport-hunted trophies brought into the US. Only 2 people, talking of David and prosecutions, only 2 people have served time in jail. 440 had to pay fines ranging from $25 to $390,000, and 54% of those violations concerned endangered species under the ESA, the Endangered Species Act. Cost of shooting a wild lion in South Africa, about $75,000. The cost of shooting a captive lion in South Africa, about $20,000. The number of US registered hunters, 11.6 million. That paints a bloody picture of what goes on in the USA. So what about elsewhere? Between 2004 and 2013, inclusive, the top 5 European countries in relation to trophy imports were Spain, 21,798, presumably including King Juan Carlos. Germany, 19,079, France, 12,333, Italy, 11,499, and Portugal, 7,913. Let's look at lion trophies into the EU 2014 to 13 inclusive. I'm only going to give you, I have to do this across 2 pages here, I'm only going to give you, out of all those European countries, the top 5. So number 1 is Spain, number 2 is France, number 3 is Germany, number 4 is Poland, number 5 is the Czech Republic, and the UK is 12th, the UK 84. Okay, according to, if you want to look up some of this data, go to the World Conservation Monitoring Centre website at Cambridge University, WCMC, and they will give you, if you want to drill down through the data, the number of trophies reported by source code H, which is H for hunting. And here are some figures for you, our figures. African elephant, 14,666. Hippopotamus, 14,205. American black bear, 12,000. European turtle dove, 11,615. Zebra, 9 and a bit thousand. Leopard, just over 4,000. And lion, 3,213. So those are some of the facts. What about the politics of trophy hunting? Many members of the European Parliament, reflecting the opinions of their constituents, have called for the EU and national governments to ban the import of certain trophies, with particular emphasis on lions and elephants. The response to their concerns has been mixed. Here is one example. The UK, in response to Catherine Bearder MEP's letter asking for those actions to be taken, has said that currently the UK will not ban the import of lion trophies from countries such as Tanzania, instead preferring to react to advice from the Scientific Review Group, an EU consultative body that advises environment ministers. The SRG, a Scientific Review Group, has so far been disinclined to take robust action, despite the increasing recognition that lion numbers in all but 5 of the 24 lion range states are in steep decline, and that in those 4 or 5 countries, the increase over the last decade has been about 11%. In all the other countries, the decline has averaged 66%. I recall when Kenya tried to seek an uplisting from Appendix 2 to Appendix 1 for African lions in 2004 in Thailand at the CITES Conference of the Parties, it was put under severe pressure from Tanzania to withdraw, which sadly it did. The UK at the time, and I was there, and I've been to every CITES conference since 1989, argued that trophy hunting did not represent the greatest threat to lions, and therefore HMG, it was advised at the time by JNCC, did not support Kenya's position. JNCC were wrong to take that position, in my view, because CITES is not about what is the biggest threat, but whether trade represents a credible threat to species, and I think there was enough evidence at the time that this was the case. It was deeply disappointing. Had an Appendix 1 listing been approved in 2004, it is almost certain that lions would not be in the very serious situation they are now, as not only would this have curtailed, although not completely banned, trophy hunting of lions, but it would have sent a warning flag to the international community that lions were going the way of the tiger and that resolute conservation action on the ground was needed. It might have, in fact, averted the situation whereby this year the IUCN has had to reclassify West African lions as critically endangered. They classify Central, East and Southern populations as vulnerable, although that is highly contestable. At that adjournment debate that I mentioned earlier, it took place only last week, I can't even remember, must be this week even, the minister stated that he was inclined to give countries with lion trophy hunting 2 years to put their houses in order, or the UK would bring in a trophy hunting ban. Now, don't get me wrong, I am firmly opposed to trophy hunting, the killing of wild animals for fun. But surely you can see that giving countries 2 years to put their houses in order, all the while allowing them to continue sport hunting lions, is going to make the situation worse, not better. I would propose an immediate suspension of all trophy imports and then require those countries who wish to carry out this practice to meet a set of strict, independently verifiable criteria before any consideration is given to future imports. The Minister in writing recently referred to 2 additional safeguards: the use of a lion aging protocol to ensure, presumably, that only lions with 60% or more of their nose coloured black and therefore determined to be over 6 years old and past breeding age are shot as trophies. This age classification was designed by Professor Craig Packer, the preeminent lion conservation biologist, in an attempt to end the taking of young males. He was disgusted with the fact that the authorities did not apply it in Tanzania, and, as I understand it, has left Tanzania, having worked there in the Serengeti for decades. I think confidence in the use of the aging protocol is low, and its rigorous application by the Tanzanian authorities even lower. I would go so far as to say that the system is so imperfect, even were it to be properly applied, that it should not be used. After all, Cecil, the illegally killed lion, had a nose that was 100% black, so he must have been way past his prime. In fact, he was 13 and had been studied for many years, and yet he had young cubs. So to say that he wasn't a viable part of the population is nonsense. The second safeguard, setting a limit or presumably a quota on the number of lions, this is the safeguard the Minister mentioned, on the number of lions that can be taken from a specific area, relies entirely on the quality of the research that is undertaken in that area, knowing the number of lions, their population demographic, the impact of other threats, persecution for livestock killing, for example, recruitment rates, and that information is not available. The DEFRA position in this country is currently out of step with the public mood, as it still cleaves to the sustainable use paradigm, which in my view is losing currency. The moral and ethical dimension is in the ascendancy. Compassionate conservation, mentioned in my introduction, a term coined by Born Free and gaining momentum in international scientific fora, and which incidentally is now housed at the Centre for Compassionate Conservation at the University of Technology, Sydney, please do look it up on the website, requires that we find ways of conserving species on our crowded planet that respect the needs of individuals as part of species and which minimizes or eliminates harm to the individual. We can argue the toss using numbers and statistics, careful management or not, sustainable offtake or unsustainable, benefits to communities or not, research suggesting that on average just 3% of the funds spent on a hunting safari are deployed at local community level. Safeguarding wild habitat or securing the playground for the rich, influential elite. But what about the ethical? Professor Roger Scruton, probably known to some of you, the moral, or some might say, philosopher, describes his first hunt. Quote, "One minute I was lost in solitary thoughts. The next I was in a world transfigured by collective energy. The energy that swept me away was neither human, nor canine, nor equine, but a peculiar synthesis of the three, a tribute to centuries of mutual dependence revived for this moment in ritual form," end quote. He goes on to say, "In that world," by which he means the wild world, "animals are not the tamed and subservient creatures of the farmyard or the family house. They are our equals with whom we are in a contest that may prove as dangerous to the hunter as it is to his quarry." Here, in my view, Professor Scruton attempts to cast the relationship between the human hunter and the persecuted in some kind of noble light. Ancient adversaries pitted against each other in time-honoured fashion. Frankly, what a lot of self-serving nonsense. The trophy hunter with his or her long-range, high-penetration, super-scoped rifle or counterbalanced crossbow or high-velocity longbow, all of them are able of hitting their target at hundreds of meters. There's nothing noble or honourable or courageous or laudable about that. In fact, quite the opposite. Those who take delight in taking life are the psychopaths that deprive the rest of us of nature's beauty. They undermine respect. They are all about ego. They are people with more money than sense, determined to satisfy that ego because, as one hunter puts it, hunting keeps me real. In conclusion, Just because we can does not mean we should. Just because it's legal does not make it right. There are too many of us and too few of them, whoever they are, whether it's the 350,000 remaining African elephants or the 25,000 rhino or the 20,000 lions. There are too few of them for us to any longer try to create economic or social arguments to justify what is simply unacceptable. The cost of trophy hunting is too high. It's time for our species to change. It's time for us to reject the killing of wild animals for fun. It's time to turn from being human beings into humane beings. Thank you very much.